皆さん、こんにちは。第18回目のアメリカあれこれ、米あれこれです。今日は、あのーイランで何が、暗殺が行われた時に、中国の、政治指導部の中で何が起きていたのかっていうことを喋っていた、多分中国、チャイニーズアメリカンだと思うんですけれど、すごく、なるほどなと思うようなところがいっぱいあったので、シェアしたいと思います。ちなみに、文の中で出てくる、ゾンナンハイとかっていう呼ぶのかちょっとわからないんですが、中南海なんですかね。これはなんか北京の中部にあって、最高政治指導部の本部として機能している施設らしいです。もちろん、日本の皆様ご存知だと思います。それで、中国政治における権力の中心的存在を象徴的に表すということです。今日のビデオの大体の要約はこういうものです。えっと、震撼の波紋、米国、イスラエルによる精密攻撃でハメネイ師が死亡したことは、イランをはるかに超えた衝撃をもたらした。北京における影響は多くの人が認識しているよりも深刻かもしれない。なぜ習近平は領海を前に軍の粛清を突然減速させたのか。なぜ国営メディアは突如として人民や民主主義を強調し始めたのか。そしてなぜ中国共産党の幹部たちは今内部討議でソビエト連邦の崩壊を公然と引き合いに出しているのか。本文席では、オペレーションエピックフューリーがいかに中国指導部内部の構造的脆弱性をあらわにしたかを検証する。後継者問題の不透明さや内部不信から情報機関への浸透懸念、そして政権不安定化への恐怖まで。米中関係が変化し、トランプ大統領の訪問が迫る中、北京は微妙な綱渡りを強いられている。戦場はいらんかもしれないが、真の問題はこの衝撃が中南海南部の権力計算をいかに塗り替えつつあるかという点である。ということです。ビデオで喋っておられる人は、レイさんという方で、えっと、字幕で一応日本語を出しますが、かなり彼女の早口ではないので、すごくわかりやすいと思います。では、ビデオを始めます。ビデオは約39分ぐらいなんですが、この中で面白いなと思ったのは、どうもアメリカかイスラエルかどっちか覚えてないですが、いわゆるほら、中国はいっぱいカメラがありますでしょ。それをね、反対にして、なんかイランの方のそういう中身とかいうのが分かったっていうような、そういうことも彼女、確か喋っていたと思います。それでお楽しみください。
Is the Lantern Festival, the 15th day of the Lunar New Year, and it's today the Lantern Festival ends the New Year period. So yeah, so the Chinese celebrate the New Year for the first 15 days, and today is the last day. All right, I hope you had a great start of the year of the horse. So far, so good? Yes? All right. Well, for the past couple of days, Xi Jinping has reportedly been deeply shaken. Last summer, when Israel fought the 12-day war with Iran, and later when US B-2 bombers carried out Operation Midnight Hammer, Jonah had already witnessed the overwhelming military superiority of the US and Israel. That alone was significant, but this time is different because nothing, absolutely nothing, is more destabilizing than a supreme leader being killed in the first few minutes of a war. You can lose territory, you can lose 1 million troops, you can endure bloodshed and destruction, but when the top leader is eliminated, the moment the war begins, that strikes at the core of a regime. And it wasn't just one person. More than 40 Iranian officials of comparable rank reportedly died alongside him. And that is not a battlefield loss. That's regime decapitation. Now, translate that into China's political structure, it would be like the entire Politburo and all of the Central Military Commission gone in one wave. Think about that. That image alone is enough to shake Zhongnanhai to its core. And then there's something else people in Beijing, people in Beijing, or I should say in Beijing's political circles, have quietly been talking about. What is it? Well, Khamenei, the deceased Iranian supreme leader, he became Iran's supreme leader on a day that's unforgettable to the Chinese. He became the top leader on June 4th, 1989. And you know that day, what that was, right? It was the same day the CCP sent troops into Tiananmen Square and opened fire on civilians. So for many Chinese, that coincidence feels symbolic. Now, it's said that Khamenei had visited China just weeks earlier than June 4th, 1989, and he met Deng Xiaoping. And there were stories, impossible to verify now, because almost everyone involved have died. But there were stories, or there are stories circulating now saying that the Iranian leader, who was in his 50s at the time, and Deng Xiaoping called him a young man because Deng was in his 70s and Khamenei was in his 50s. So the Iranian warned Deng Xiaoping about foreign interference and possibly American interference behind the pro-democracy movement, and he supported a firm crackdown. Now, whether those accounts are true or not, his rise to power on June 4th, 1989, permanently linked his political fate to a trauma deeply embedded in Chinese memory. It was said at the time Deng Xiaoping was hesitant. He was unsure about a military crackdown. So we don't know whether the Iranian leader's visit. I mean, he was a leader in exile at the time, but we don't know if his firm support of a crackdown solidified the decision for Deng Xiaoping. Now that he has fallen, some in China are asking whether that connection carries a new meaning. So tonight, I'm going to walk you through information coming out of Beijing about how the CCP leadership reacted to Iran's latest developments. The sources include state media reports, Chinese language media based outside China, particularly in the US, and social media accounts. All right. How are people doing? Yeah. You like my new camera? I think the resolution is not very focused. I have yet to figure out how to adjust the lighting. But there's lighting behind me, so my face looks a little dark. Anyways, but you can see me. All right, let's get started. Now, after Operation Epic Fury began, Xinhua CCTV and Hong Kong-based Phoenix TV all sent frontline reporters to Iran. But here's what's interesting. Whether CCP leaders blindly trusted their own analysts or simply refused to accept reality, they did not believe the Iranian leadership would fall so quickly. I'll elaborate on this later, but let me first tell you Xi Jinping's reaction, or alleged reaction. Xinhua reportedly submitted 2 internal reports directly to Xi Jinping, and he was shocked. Now, CCTV's Frontline War correspondents also produced a 15-minute internal documentary about Khamenei's death. It reportedly began with the supreme leaders having breakfast with his top officials, and it ended with ground teams searching for his remains in the rubble. State media outlets in China are not just propaganda machines. They are charged with the responsibility to produce classified internal reports for top officials, and they are called 内参, or internal information. So according to circulating accounts, Xi Jinping, his wife, and members of the Politburo Standing Committee watched the CCTV documentary together. The video reportedly showed in detail how ground personnel searched for the supreme leader's body. The images were described as graphic and disturbing. It was said that Xi's wife found it so upsetting that she stepped away. Now, there are even claims that the viewing had a psychological impact on Xi Jinping. It's serious enough to require medical attention. We do not know whether it was something like a spike in blood pressure or something more serious. No details were shared, but according to the source, there were medical consequences, or at least doctors were called. Okay, so, and then it was said that Xi Jinping did not sleep well for 2 days, and then he made a major policy shift. The Chinese embassy in Tehran was reportedly ordered to destroy all contracts and documents related to supersonic weapons sales to Iran. Western media reported even, I think, at least a week ago, about China's upcoming supersonic weapons sales to Iran. So that the Chinese embassies was ordered to destroy contracts and documents. And wolf warrior diplomats were instructed to deny that China had any military plans with Iran. Now, here's Xi Jinping's biggest dilemma. President Trump is scheduled to visit China from March 31st to April 2nd. However, Beijing has not formally confirmed the trip. The South China Morning Post previously reported that both sides were still negotiating the details, and Xi Jinping reportedly wanted the visit to be carefully staged, a high-profile event that would strengthen his domestic political standing. So his team has been negotiating every detail, like the number of steps and where to shake hands. Trump, however, does not like the meeting to be highly scripted, and he's known to be very improvisational, right? He likes to improvise. And now, after the Iran strike, Xi Jinping faces a difficult choice. Should he still welcome Trump to Beijing after Trump eliminated the leadership of one of Beijing's key strategic partners? On the one hand, Xi Jinping wants Trump's visit desperately. It would help stabilize internal politics and signal that US-China relations remain well under control, or well under his control. On the other hand, he risks being accused of appearing weak, of failing to stand up to what some inside the party might call American aggression. Now, if he cancels the meeting, that carries consequences too. US-China relations could deteriorate from there on. And internally, she could still be blamed for mishandling relations with Washington. And to make matters worse, Trump reportedly said operations in Iran could continue indefinitely, or at least for another 4 to 5 weeks, which would overlap with the planned China visit. And that makes Xi Jinping's decision even harder. Now, here's the uncomfortable part. Xi's current predicament appears to stem from a series of misjudgments and intelligence failures. Two sources say that before the airstrikes, the CCP leadership held an optimistic assessment of the situation. They believed the United States and Israel would not carry out a decapitation strike. They assumed the conflict would remain at the level of deterrence and pressure, not a direct hit on the core of Iran's power structure. Well, that assumption proved wrong, and very wrong. And because of that confidence, Chinese diplomatic personnel in Iran reportedly did not complete evacuation preparations in advance. Only after missiles struck and Tehran was shaken did Beijing scramble to adjust. Even then, Beijing's biggest response, or I should say, its first response was unusually restrained. So on the night of the strike, China's foreign ministry issued a statement of less than 80 words. It said only that China was highly concerned. It emphasized respect for Iran's sovereignty and called for an end to military operations. It did not use the word condemn, and it did not even mention the United States or Israel by name. And according to a Beijing insider familiar with the diplomatic system, the statement was actually a downgraded version. And the original version, or the original draft, reportedly used stronger language and directly assigned responsibility to the US and Israel. But those phrases were deleted one by one during internal discussions and reviews. The final guiding principle, according to the source, was very simple. It is, do not directly implicate the US and Israel. Later, after Khamenei's death was confirmed, Beijing shifted to stronger language. Foreign Minister Wang Yi described the killing of a sovereign leader and the incitement of regime change as unacceptable during his phone call with his counterpart, with his Russian counterpart. But by then, the strategic miscalculation was already clear. Now, the deceased Iranian supreme leader was 86. He had maintained close ties with the CCP. Like I mentioned earlier, he came to power on June 4th, 1989. And 1 month before that, he visited Beijing. And by the way, this Khamenei, he was in exile. He was in France, and he did not make many international trips. It's not like he goes on visits, quite often. So it was rare that he visited foreign countries or he left France to go on an international trip. But he did visit China right before his quote unquote inauguration. So in recent years, Iran had reportedly received technical support from China in security fields, particularly in safeguarding the top leaders' personal safety. Iran has relied on Beijing for that. Yet none of that prevented the precision strike this Saturday. And so, according to insiders, that outcome also shattered Beijing's confidence in its own technological cooperation capabilities. Another source within the CCP system said that although security assessments had been conducted, Chinese decision makers relied on outdated assumptions. And also they have heavily relied on official information coming from, they have relied on information coming from official Tehran sources. And that turned out to be a serious miscalculation. Now, they say that before Tehran was bombed, the number of Chinese diplomatic personnel evacuated from Iran was even smaller than the number previously evacuated from Venezuela. So you can imagine how surprised the Chinese were. There were no strong early warnings issued before the strike, and evacuation decisions came only after. I mean, they weren't. All countries were issuing evacuation notices to its citizens living in Iran, and Beijing. I mean, the Chinese embassy in Tehran only followed the other Western nations, but they weren't very serious about it. And that's how a strategic misjudgment became a political crisis, because they weren't prepared. Now let's move to what's happening inside Beijing in the days after the strike took place. As the war in Iran intensifies, sources say senior CCP officials have been holding frequent high-level meetings. The pace of internal assessments has clearly increased. Various departments have entered what they call risk screening mode because they're trying to get the situation under control. And here's the key point. Their focus is not on battlefield details. They're not obsessed over which airbase was hit or how many missiles were fired. The real question inside Zhongnanhai is this: is Iran's power structure loosening? And if it is, could something similar happen in China? Beijing is studying Iran closely, not to win the war, but to make sure the same kind of shock never happens to them. Several insiders say that what the leadership truly fears is not the economic impact of the war, like the loss of oil imports, or I mean, to some extent they are concerned, but not as much as the fear of the political impact. So what they're concerned is the political chain reaction. In other words, regime risk. And one insider, Mr. Liang, told the Chinese Epoch Times that in recent months, China's foreign ministry has maintained close communication with both Iran and Russia. He said that there have been frequent three-way contacts. Iran has been asking Beijing and Moscow for stronger support, but so far neither China nor Russia has signaled concrete action. Iran is dissatisfied, but it has few options. At the same time, Beijing has been extremely cautious publicly. No early condemnation, no strong language at first. And Mr. Liang also said that members of the 7-person Politburo Standing Committee have met several times to discuss the Middle East situation. We don't know the details of those meetings, but one thing stood out. Senior officials were reminded to draw lessons from the collapse of the former Soviet Union, the Soviet Communist Party. And that kind of historical comparison is rare in high-level discussions in Beijing. When the Soviet collapse becomes a reference point, that tells you something about the level of anxiety. So Mr. Liang added that they are watching the anti-government protests in Iran very closely, especially how ordinary people are reacting to the situation. And he pointed out something interesting. Online public opinion in China has been leaning toward sympathy for the Iranian people. That, from Beijing's perspective, is not a small detail. And he said the collapse of the Soviet Union has been repeatedly mentioned internally as a risk benchmark. So that's not all about oil. it's about regime survival. And the deeper concern is political spillover. So right now, insiders say Beijing is trying to balance three things at once: maintain cooperation or ties with Tehran, avoid direct confrontation with Washington, and also prevent domestic public opinion from becoming unstable. So those are the three things Beijing is trying to juggle or balance well. But if you really look at the Soviet collapse, it was the result of external pressure plus internal fractures, and which is exactly what Beijing is experiencing right now. And that's why the Soviet collapse is being used internally as a warning model. So for Beijing, what is happening in Iran is not just a regional war, it's an external projection of regime risk. What Beijing fears is the demonstration effect of the development in Iran. Now, here's something subtle but important, right? I need to back up what I say with a statement. This is very interesting. Now, all of the concerns, all of CCP's concerns have coincided with a noticeable shift in propaganda tone. On March 1st, Xinhua suddenly published a major article with this title. The title says, "All state power belongs to the people, highlight something to the effect that Xi Jinping's concept of, quote, whole process people's democracy." Okay, I mean, it's a direct translation of the title. It just doesn't make, I mean, this says all state power belongs to the people, highlighting Xi Jinping's concept of, quote, whole process a people's democracy. It's just bad English, but that's what it is. It's people's democracy, but it's a whole process people's democracy. Okay, now, when a system feels pressure, sometimes the language shifts first. And that shift may tell us more than any official statement. And this is how the article says. It says, the 2026 National Two sessions are about to convene. Respecting the people's initiative, gathering the collective wisdom of the people, and unleashing the people's strength. This spring, whole process people's democracy will write a new chapter. And then it also repeated, people's democracy is the lifeblood of socialism. And then when it continues, without democracy, there is no socialism, no modernization, no national rejuvenation. Notice the two key words here that suddenly appeared everywhere: people and then democracy. Now ask yourself, why why all of a sudden emphasize people and then democracy? Well, the timing makes a lot of sense, right? Think about it. The Chinese people are very smart. They sense CCP's fear immediately. So online reaction was immediate and sharp. And someone said, the party suddenly became very obedient. The US bunker busting bombs and decapitation strikes must have shaken them to the core. And another person says, the Iranian supreme leader falls, and suddenly it is the people's turn. Their speed in saying the word democracy is faster than missiles. So people are not naive. They clearly sensed CCP's fear. They sense that the regime is worried about large-scale unrest, like what has already happened in Iran, and what could happen now in Iran again. Okay, now here's another problem that Xi Jinping has in particular, and that's another deeper impact from the decapitation strike. What is it? Succession. Before his death, the Iranian leader reportedly arranged 4 layers of succession plans. In contrast, inside the CCP, even mentioning succession is politically sensitive. It's a political taboo. And that's the vulnerability. A system without a clear succession mechanism is extremely exposed in a decapitation scenario. Iran's situation has given Xi Jinping's internal opposition, his political enemies, a powerful argument. Xi must name a successor, and not just name someone symbolically, but allow that person to function in real capacity. Because if something suddenly happens, title alone does not guarantee control. Arrangements on paper are not the same as operational authority. So Xi Jinping must act. And here's the problem. He does not want to designate a successor. He's been trying to dodge the bullet for as long as he could. He has shown every sign of wanting to rule indefinitely and is to establish a Xi family dynasty. That's what there are widely circulating rumors that I can't verify, even come from very credible political analysts like Professor Yuan Hongbin. Professor Yuan Hongbin has said that one of Xi Jinping's major clashes with Zhang Youxia was the fact that Xi Jinping wants to pass power to his children, or to one of his illicit children, because he officially has one daughter, but he has couple of kids born outside his marriage to Peng Liyuan, and he wants to pass power to one of them. So that makes succession extremely sensitive, and the issue alone can become a flashpoint inside the party. So what does Xi Jinping do under this pressure? He has 2 choices. Option 1, follow the rational path. Establish a layered succession plan. From a governance perspective, that's logical, but the timing is terrible. Because the decapitation strike happened at the exact moment that Xi Jinping is already locked in a political stalemate over the arrest of the 2 generals. And then right before the Saturday, remember I told you that the National People's Congress, the Standing Committee of the National Congress expelled 22 delegates in 2 sessions in the month of February, yet the 2 generals were not among them. So that suggests internal friction. It suggests that Zhao Leji, the head of the NPC, are not fully aligned with Xi Jinping right now. So if Xi Jinping cannot even smoothly remove certain figures, how easily can he push through a successor of his own choosing? Either he doesn't trust anyone, or the rest of the party doesn't trust his choices. So under those conditions, Xi Jinping may shift into what we call silent defense: lower visibility, avoid escalation, contain risks. And that explains why the state media published that article that emphasized democracy and people. But Xi Jinping has a second option. He could accelerate. He could eliminate potential rivals faster and more broadly, then install a successor on his own terms. And this would be a silent offensive. Personally, I think the first scenario is more likely right now. I think the chances for Xi Jinping to play offense is small. He appears to be playing defense. And after arresting the two generals, he seems to be preparing for his chance to survive at the 21st Party Congress. And in order to do that, he must purge the military. He must conduct a sweeping purge of the PLA to remove the remaining influence of General Zhang Youxia and Liu Zhengli in the PLA. Otherwise, he cannot control the military. And if he cannot control the military, he would not be able to remain in power at the 21st Party Congress. So that was his plan. And then suddenly he stopped. The timing aligns almost exactly with Khamenei's assassination or the decapitation strike. So it suggests something important. External decapitation shock interrupted internal consolidation plans. Because a purge only works if you are certain of the consequences or the outcome, right? A purge assumes you have absolute control, that the military cannot push back, and no one would coordinate with outside forces. Now, none of those conditions exist for Xi Jinping. Because when the United States demonstrates deep infiltration capability, precision tracking, targeted elimination of leadership, then a new variable appears. Because if Xi Jinping continues to squeeze the military, then someone inside, will decide that they have nothing to lose. And then when internal fear combines with external penetration, a purge could become deadly. It could become a trigger. So that's why Xi Jinping appears to have made a structural shift. So people say that some generals in detention were quietly released. Now, these generals are not Zhang Youxia, not Liu Zhengli, but others. Some of them are retired generals. They're not that important, but they were not prosecuted. They were not restored, but they were also not publicly visible. They're just, it's not forgiveness. They're just quietly, released for some form of political quarantine. It's a way to, it's a coup prevention intervention, coup prevention management by Xi Jinping, right? So that's it for Xi Jinping. If bunkers fail, if inner circles are penetrated, if concealment doesn't work, then the logical question is, he's going to ask, what about his inner circle, right? Especially after he has just arrested two most senior military leaders, and the environment increases paranoia. And reports say, and this today we just heard the Israeli intelligence agency Mossad penetrated deeply into Iran, monitoring through Tehran's traffic cameras, right? You heard about that today. Accessing almost the entire system, they were able to use social network analysis to map life patterns. And they're tracking not just leaders, but their bodyguards, routes, schedules, routines. And so one Israeli intelligence officer reportedly said, "We know Tehran the way we know Jerusalem." Now think about China. China has way more surveillance cameras than Iran. China has allegedly 700 million surveillance cameras across the country. They're used to monitor citizens. But now, if foreign intelligence ever gained access, then those cameras, that same system could theoretically map the movements of top officials and their bodyguards and their aides, right? So it's ironic that China built this massive surveillance system only to find out, or the CCP built this massive surveillance system only to find out that it could turn back and become a lethal weapon against the leaders. And also, remember the CIA's recent recruitment campaigns? 4 Chinese language recruitment videos in less than a year, and the total combined views have reached over, I heard today, 115 million views. And that sent a message. The fear is not just military strike, it's penetration depth. And this is the real anxiety behind all of this. And once that fear sets in, everything changes. Now, the fact that the deceased Iranian supreme leader became the leader on June 4th, 1989, forever binds his story to a date that Chinese people can never forget. So for many of them, that coincidence feels symbolic. And that is why, in the end, it is not about Iran. It's about CCP's vulnerability. So Operation Epic Fury proved that in the age of precision warfare, even the most heavily guarded leader is not untouchable. And that is deadly, right? Confidence. So if Beijing cannot, I don't think Beijing can rebuild confidence. Doubts have already turned inward. The arrest of the 2 generals have already turned doubts inward. And confidence at this point cannot be rebuilt. Everything that happened before this Saturday is already a done deal. So the question is no longer whether the system feels the shock, it's how long it can contain the consequences. So that's what I have for you tonight. I want to answer a question.
いかがでしたでしょうか。ビデオの最後の方で、6月4日、1989年について彼女、レイさん言っておられましたけれど、これは、私は知らなかったんですが、チェックしてみたら、on June 4th, 1989, アヤトラ・コメイニが The Supreme Leader of Iran died っていう、あるんですね。それで中国でその時何が起きていたかというと、ほら、例の天安門事件がなんか同じ日だったらしいんですね。それでやっぱりそういうことにかこつけて、やっぱり中国の指導内部でもビクビクしているんじゃないかみたいなことを確か感じさせるようなことを言っておられたと思います。ということで、もしご興味あったら彼女の方にYouTube チェックしてみてください。あと39分後の後は確かコメントに対しての返事をされていたと思います。ということで今日はこれで終わります。じゃあ次回まで良い一日をお過ごしください。それで、今その登録と、拡散といいねも何卒よろしくお願いします。Thank you so much and have a wonderful day and bye bye. Thank you.